It's almost Christmas, which means two things. One, I just got done watching Die Hard. And two, I gotta get you guys something, some kind of gift, something cool, something like maybe a copy of one of my books, or better yet, how about a video on setups and payoffs? Just what you've always wanted. Anyway, I'm Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Bad Parts, also the author of Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. And whether you want it or not, I'm giving you a video on setups and payoffs today. And these are some key story elements that can help you build excitement and explosiveness in your stories. I'm going to talk about what setups and payoffs are. I'm going to give you the purpose of setups and payoffs. I'm going to talk about when to use them. And I'm also going to give you some examples from the movie Die Hard, which I just got done watching, so I'm kind of an expert on. But we're going to start off with the question of what are setups and payoffs. And the simplest way to explain this is to think of setups and payoffs as seeds and trees. You plant a seed or setup and then it pays off later on as a tree or as some kind of revelation in your story. Now if you want a little better definition than that, a setup would be a story element that hints at a revelation that is yet to come. And a setup can be any number of things. It could be something like an exchange of dialogue, or it could be a symbol or a secret or character habits or strange behavior or a locked door or evidence at a crime scene, a hint of romance, or so many other things. There's a lot of different possibilities for what a setup could be in your story. Now as for what a payoff is a surprise that comes as a result of learning more about the setup. We get more knowledge and then we are shown that setup in a new surprising light. It's a refreshing take on what we originally thought of the setup. Now let's take a look at the purpose of setups and payoffs. And there are several purposes out there. I narrowed it down to 4 for this video. And the first one is that setups and payoffs make shocking story events believable. If something happens at the very end of your story and it's a complete mind blow, maybe you're watching a murder mystery and at the very end you find out that the killer was actually the detective or the killer was actually somebody totally innocent or somebody who seemed totally innocent, that might be a mind blow. That might be an impressive payoff at the end of the story. But it only works if it's set up properly. Another purpose of setups and payoffs is to build suspense and keep your audience guessing. Sometimes when it comes to storytelling, you might hear the phrase Chekhov's gun. And what this means, basically, when you have a story and somebody introduces a gun, like it's sitting on the mantelpiece or it's sitting on a table or you find it in someone's bedroom, whenever there's attention brought to a gun in a story, the audience is conditioned to expect something to happen with that gun, i.e. that gun is going to go off at some point. Another purpose of setups and payoffs is to drive your character arcs. We'll talk about this a little later in the video when I get to my examples. And then the final purpose of setups and payoffs is to bring your story full circle or to connect the beginning and ending parts of your story. Now let's talk about when to use setups and payoffs. And we'll start with setups. Setups are usually planted in the first half of your story. This gives you time to develop them over the course of the story, but just so we're clear, you certainly can have setups in the second half of your story. That's totally fine. You could have setups and payoffs all over the course of your story. Another thing to keep in mind, try to space out your setups. You don't want everything at once. You don't want all your setups in chapter 1 because that's just overwhelming to the reader. And the same goes for your payoffs. You don't want to wait till the very end to unload all of your payoffs. You want to be blowing up things along the way. That way you keep the pacing going throughout your story. You keep things exciting. Another important thing to know is that the time between your setups and your payoffs can vary. You can have a setup in chapter 3 that has a payoff in chapter 6. Or you could have a setup in chapter 3 that has a payoff in chapter 27 or chapter 50 or whatever it is. Different setups and payoffs will have different amounts of time between them. And then one last thing I want to throw out there is that you get bonus points if you have 2 or more payoffs hitting at once. Alright, now I promised I'd talk about Die Hard. Let's talk about it. I have 3 examples of setups and payoffs from this movie. And just so we're all on the same page, Die Hard is a Christmas movie about a New York cop who flies out to Los Angeles to rekindle things with his estranged wife. And he attends her Christmas party at her office building, and just as he's about to start patching things back together with her, unfortunately for him, the building gets stormed by a bunch of terrorists who are trying to extract some money from a vault. And John McClane, our main character, he has to use his wits and his guts in order to outsmart these terrorists and save the hostages in the building. And it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. We're going to talk about it today because I have 3 specific examples of setups and payoffs from Die Hard. And the first example example is what I call a disguised or downplayed setup. And this comes right at the start of the movie when we first meet John McClane. We see the plane landing in Los Angeles. We see that John McClane is uncomfortable with flying, and the guy he's sitting next to on the flight mentions that if you really want to get over your discomfort with flying, once you get to the hotel room, take off your socks and shoes and make fists with your toes on the carpet. And this is something that at the very beginning of the movie we probably don't think much of. We probably just think, it's just, there to show that John McClane's afraid of flying. He's a human being. He has fears just like you and me. But later on, we see this idea developing over the course of the story. He takes off his socks and shoes once he's at his wife's office building. He starts making fists with his toes on the carpet. And this may not seem like a big deal, but John McClane ends up spending the entire rest of the movie barefoot. And it especially has a major payoff later on when he's having a shootout with two of the terrorists, and one of them tells the other to shoot the glass, meaning that shoot the glass windows in a room that John McClane is holed up in. And instead of John McClane having an easy escape from this room, he has to walk across broken glass barefoot, and it's one of the most just agonizing scenes to watch. Every time I watch it, it just makes me cringe. And he eventually has to actually pick out the glass while he's having a conversation with one of the major supporting characters. A second type of payoff from Die Hard is what I call the bonus payoff. And this involves the detonators that John McClane finds about midway through the story. Now, this is a setup, and anyone who's seen an action movie in their lives knows that if there's a bomb, it's going to go off at some point. John McClane decides to use this C4 in order to attack the terrorists. At this point in the movie, the terrorists are shooting rockets at the police and everything, and John McClane's pissed off about this. So what he does, he ends up throwing the C4 down an elevator shaft and he detonates it. And this causes a massive explosion, and it sends a message, hey, leave my people alone. And this is something that seems like a pretty strong payoff, but there's actually a bonus payoff that occurs later on in the story. Because we learn that even after John McClane blows up the C4, the terrorist leader still wants those detonators. And John McClane's wondering, what does he want with the detonators? And it's not until almost at the very end that we learn that the rooftop is rigged to explode. And once the detonators are found, the hostages on the roof are in mortal danger. And then the third type of setup and payoff is the character arc payoff. And this is a very common one because most stories include characters who have an arc, characters who change. And for the example I'm using in this one, we're going to go with Alan Powell, who is one of the major supporting characters in this story. He's a cop who works behind a desk. He doesn't feel too good about himself because of that. He wants to be out on the streets doing the nitty-gritty work. And John McClane talks to him about this over the course of the story. When we're first introduced to Alan, we learn about him working behind a desk, and that's the setup. And then later on, we get a hint into his backstory. We learn that he feels bad about shooting someone and killing someone while on the job, and ever since then, he's been afraid to pull his gun, so now he works behind a desk. And it isn't until the very, very, very end of the story where this setup is paid off, when we get to see Alan take out his gun and shoot one of the remaining terrorists who tries to kill John and Holly after they're reunited at the end. So this is something that is just it's a great payoff, because even after the main action of the story is done, we think everything's going to be a-okay for our heroes. They're reunited, everything's great, the day is saved. Not yet. And then Alan Powell, he finishes his character arc and overcomes his guilt and uses his weapon to save people. So I hope this helps. And in the spirit of setups and payoffs, I'm going to pay off one particular setup from the very beginning of this video. And if you remember, early on I mentioned that maybe I'd be giving away a free copy of one of my books. And here's what's going to happen. 3 lucky winners are going to win a free audiobook copy of either one of my books. Whichever one you're more interested in, I'll give you a free audiobook copy of it. And all you have to do in order to win is drop a comment in the comment section below and answer the questions: what are your favorite movie? And what is one example of a setup and a corresponding payoff from that movie? And also mention the word audiobook somewhere in your comment, just so I know that you're interested in the audiobook deal. But all you have to do, just tell me what your favorite movie is, list a setup and payoff from that movie, and then just mention the word audiobook, and you'll be entered into this contest. And if you want to increase your chances of winning, you can go on my Twitter page and retweet my post about this video. You'll see it right up there. And if you retweet it, I'll entry in. I think what I'll do, I'll pick 2 winners from the comment section below, and then I will also pick a winner from Twitter. So we'll have 3 winners, 3 chances at getting an audiobook, either Bad Parts or Entry Wounds. Thank you guys for watching me throughout the year, and I hope we have some more fun in 2022. And Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. And as always, remember to keep on writing.